Hi guys, you're all very welcome to today's live masterclass with ExamRevision.ie. My name is Daniel. I am a secondary school teacher, but also I have corrected Leaving Cert English higher level for the State Exams Commission for the last couple of years. So yeah, today's live session is going to be on the single text King Lear. So just to kind of give you an overview of what we're hoping to go through today. So I'm going to go through the need to know key moments from the play itself, alright? So this is going to be the first, hopefully, in a series of sessions, and today is going to be focusing primarily around plot, but we are going to bring in other considerations as we go along. There's going to be pointers and tips to consider in a response to the single text essay. Now again, I'm not a font of all knowledge on King Lear. It's a vast play, and I'm sure your teachers are excellent, and I'm sure you've gotten lots of good information off them. So this isn't about reinventing the wheel, kind of just looking at little kind of tips and pointers that I've found over the last couple of years, either teaching my own students or looking through exam scripts, 300 odd, 400 odd exam scripts for the last couple of years as well for the state exams. What stands out? What makes a good single text essay, etc. And then most importantly, we're going to hopefully have time for some questions and answers at the end. So the chat box there, the function of the chat box, do throw your questions in there. I'm going to try and get through as much material as I can, and then I will have a look at the chat box at the end. But again, if I don't get time to answer them in the session, I promise I will give you a reply. I will give you a response to your question. So I'd be delighted to hear questions. That's hopefully trying to get as much out of this as you can, so you can put them into the chat box. You can also, there's going to be a post on our Instagram story with a box open where you can throw your King Lear questions in there, and I will respond to them as well. Okay, so look, hopefully you'll enjoy it. This session will also, it's a live session right now, but it will be available on the ExamRevision.ie YouTube channel after the session is on. Okay, so look, without further ado, to begin with, the exam focus. So I'm sure you all know this, but just to remind ourselves, so the single text, your Shakespeare essay, ideally if you're listening to this session. So it's going to be the first section on paper 2. Okay, there's 60 marks going for it in total. There's 2 different questions. So traditionally that would have been kind of the traditional kind of literary question for the first one. So option 1 would have been, say, looking at theme, character, plot, etc. And then the second option, kind of dramatic techniques. But either way, you do have the option of 2 different single text questions on Lear. The golden rule, how much do you have to write? So I'm sure you've asked your teachers this. Some teachers might have a different opinion, but I would say to my students, and again from marking, if you're writing a single text response that's less than 4 pages, it's usually going to be lacking something. Okay, so I do find it's about quality and quantity, but at the same time, kind of 4 A4 pages is kind of that kind of comfort zone. I wouldn't be going beyond 5. I definitely wouldn't be going beyond 6, because then you're starting to waffle. And again, it is in an exam situation. So you have about, I would say, just in and around an hour, 60 to 65 minutes to complete it. Okay? Now, so the first kind of takeaway from today's session. So again, hopefully you're going to leave this session having learnt a couple of things, or at least reminded you of a couple of things. So the first thing I want to draw to your attention is, so as a teacher, as an examiner, is the marks breakdown. All right. So again, people say English is so subjective, it's all about opinion. That's true, but it's also, there is still a marking scheme. Okay. So it's not just this wild goose chase where the examiner just kind of imagines what the mark is. So there are these guidelines that I think if a student understands them, and if a student understands the point of view that the examiner is coming from, then it's really, really useful for you. Okay, so hopefully this is ringing some bells with you, but it's the PCLM marking scheme. Okay, purpose, coherence, language, mechanics, and it's 18, 18, 18 and 6. So PCLM is used throughout both Leaving Cert exam papers, and that's just the specific breakdown for the 60 marker single text. So very, very quickly, I'm not going to spend too much time in it, but just to remind you, or to flag it with you, purpose is the most important thing for every question. Okay, because purpose is basically the examiner saying, has the candidate answered the question being asked of them? Okay, So your teacher, I'm sure your teachers have told you, stick to what you're being asked. Don't deviate. Don't waffle. It doesn't matter if, let's say, for example, you get a single text question on the theme of justice in King Lear. I know they won't be as simple as that, but let's say it's on that, okay? And you answer a magnificent question, but it's related to gender, okay? Your P mark is going to suffer then, okay? Because it doesn't matter how good the quality of your answer is, because the quality depends on if you are actually sticking to that P mark, okay? So again, that will also act as a ceiling, all right? For example, if your purpose mark, if the examiner scores you 12 out of 18 on your purpose mark, then every other mark, your C mark and your L mark, can only be 12 or below. There's no such thing as you get 12 in purpose and 13 in coherence, okay? So that's why the P mark, the purpose mark, that's why I have an asterisk beside it. It is vitally important. Coherence then. So is the candidate, is the student, are they clear in their communication? Have they developed their ideas correctly? Is the organization of ideas on the page, is it does it have that, I call it the readability factor? Because remember, the examiner is reading, you're writing, but you're going to be read by this examiner, so it needs to be clear, it needs to be tight language, so you need to be careful in that. So the ideas have to be kind of discussed, developed, and just brought together. The language mark then, your use of language, your control of language. So your syntax, your expression, but equally kind of like is your use of vocabulary. So are you using words like soliloquy? Are you using kind of the target language expected of a single text and expected of your study of Lear as a text? And then your mechanics mark, your 6 marks, your spelling, your grammar, your punctuation. Again, if you have a waiver, you should, I would say you know what that means. If you do have a waiver, you don't have to worry about the mechanics mark because it doesn't count for you then. All right. I should also say at this point, guys, that there's a lot more. I have a lot more detail in the ExamRevision.ie. We have got our website, which I will bring up at the end just to kind of flag with you. But our website does have a vast amount of material and resources on King Lear and poetry and all of the other topics as well. But it goes through specifically how to write a single text essay. So the actual instructions on how to write an essay. We have a resource pack there that I think it's hitting 100 pages. But again, more of that later. So let's keep going. So key moments. And this is what I'm going to do, because look, the play, you probably took 4 or 5 weeks to actually read this play in 50 or 60 or whatever. So we haven't got hours here. We're hoping to finish up in and around 3 o'clock. So I was thinking, how can you best approach the play? So in your single text, how can you best approach the play when you are studying the play? Okay. So how many of you actually sat there with the textbook, with the actual play in front of you, not knowing where to start? Because it can be, Shakespeare as a thing, it can be quite overwhelming. It doesn't have to be though. Okay. So what are key moments, first of all? So a key moment in a text should do one of the following things. All right. It can do more than one, but it should at least do one of them. It develops the plot. Okay, so it moves the plot forward. It introduces an important character. It explores a theme. Or it should challenge or change a reader or an audience's viewpoint or impression of the text. Okay, something happens to make you kind of shocked or startled or sad, whatever. That emotional kind of personal response. Okay, this is important now, and this is something that students do no matter how many times. I'm sure your own teachers have said this to you. Key moments, they should act as your gateway to the plot. All right, so please, you have to avoid these bland kind of summaries. Okay, you can safely assume that the person examining and correcting your work knows the plot. All right, you're not starting from scratch. You're not being expected to start from scratch. So avoid these bland summaries. So instead, treat your study and your approach to the play and your approach to talking about the plot, treat it as a collection of well-chosen, carefully considered key moments. And that word there, carefully considered. So that's what today's session is going to go through. I've done the donkey work for you here. I'm telling you, these are the key moments that you need to know, and you need to know well. All right. So I'm not going to be going through the entire play. I'm going through scenes that are vital. That if you know these scenes, you know the plot of King Lear. All right, so you're at the stage now, forget about reading the play cover to cover. You've done that, you've been there. You now need to just simply learn these key moments, consider these key moments, reflect on them, and write about them. Okay? Okay, so before we actually, I'm nearly at the key scenes, don't worry. But before you get to that point, so it's the starting point, understanding the Shakespearean tragedy formula. And what I'm going to show you here now, again, a good higher level student, it's a given. The way the papers are going, they're much more sophisticated. It's expected that you will know the key moment. So it's expected you'll know the love scene. It's expected you'll know the storm scene. It's expected you'll know the cliff scene with Gloucester. That's a given, all right? That's not really, not that it's not enough anymore, but how do you stand out? Again, think of the examiner sitting there in late June, early July, a stack of scripts, they get to your script. How can you stand out? And it's not about showing off. It's not about kind of being, people always think with higher level English it's about using posh, kind of fancy language. It's really not. It's just about developing your writing and developing your thought process in a sophisticated way, in a very kind of, and developing that kind of personal engagement, personal response. So what I always say to my students, have an understanding of the tragedy formula for the plot. And if you do that, it will give you a richer kind of reflection and a richer kind of higher quality answer. So very simply, and again, this is explained in much more detail in the study pack that's available on ExamRevision.ie, but very simply, you start with this. All right, Shakespeare's 4 great tragedies, King Lear, Othello, Macbeth, and Hamlet, they all have this in common. So they have the disruption, the journey, the acceptance, the clash of good and evil, and the restoration. So what does this actually mean then, right? So let's translate this for ourselves. When I say disruption, it means that the play, something happens in the play. The opening, or at least early on in the play, something happens to kind of disrupt the natural order of things. When I say the natural order, all I mean there is the way things are done, the way things happen. Okay, so the disruption in Lear obviously is in the opening scene. The disruption of the natural order is Lear's love test. Okay, it's Lear's ego and it's his love test. That puts a spanner in the works. All right, we know what that spanner is. So that's the disruption of the natural order. It makes things come apart. The whole court implodes. All right, the journey then. So Lear is our tragic hero. Lear is our main character. Lear, this disruption happens. Lear then is cast aside. Lear goes on that journey. Okay, and the journey that Lear goes on, it causes him great suffering. Okay, he has to go through that kind of walk through the storm and get to the other side, literally and metaphorically. Okay, so the journey he goes on, so the disruption of the natural order, the journey, the suffering of the tragic hero, till he reaches that point of acceptance. Okay, the character has to kind of, again, it's very kind of epic, it's very kind of like Shakespearean and theatrical as much as anything. Okay, the acceptance, the character accepts their destiny, the character accepts this is their life now, this is what they have to do. It comes quite late for Lear, but it has to happen. And then you're nearing the end of the play, the clash of good versus evil. So again, think of like Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader, whatever. It's that kind of very Shakespearean thing. The two opposing forces have to face off against one another, and in that clash of good versus evil, evil does kind of, it is expelled from the court, good does prevail. But again, this is a tragedy formula. It results in the complete destruction of everything. So that's why you might wonder, okay, why does everyone die at the end? Because it is a tragedy. So good and evil both kind of perish in the end. Characters are left behind, and then the kind of the tragedy formula, it rounds itself off by this kind of restoration. Okay, this kind of chance at a rebirth. This kind of, okay, let's start again. We've gone through this suffering. Let's learn from it and hopefully start afresh, start again. Okay, so again, that is the tragedy formula, and like I said, it's just to give you an idea, but I'm not telling you to specifically write about this, but it will allow a deeper and richer discussion hopefully, and it will give you that higher quality answer. And it's an easy way to remember the plot as well. Okay, so I can put this scene into disruption, that's going to be the journey, the acceptance. Alright, so it's to help you along with your thinking, when you're thinking and ultimately when you're writing about the key moments. And just then, a reflection. Okay, So at its heart, King Lear, what is the play actually about? So if I was to sit you down right now and say, okay, I want you to tell me what King Lear is about. I want you to reflect on the play. And again, what does that word reflect mean? It means to think deeply, to consider. All right, to not just, it's the opposite of kind of skim reading or just kind of going through something. So to actually sit and consider and give time to, what is this play about? What is Shakespeare actually trying to say in this text? All right, so at its heart, King Lear, it's a play about a lack of judgment. All right, so the aging Lear, again, drunk on his own power, places his trust and places his faith in the wrong people. All right, so that's something that really comes back to haunt him. All right, those poor decisions that Lear makes. His own ego sets in motion a series of devastating, tragic, horrible events, leading to many deaths and the complete destruction of the court. So in a future session, when we do a character study of different characters and the tragic hero kind of idea, we will talk about this idea, Lear is an architect of his own downfall. Okay, that there is just a lovely little sentence. If you have a piece of paper in front of you, I would scribble that down. Lear is the architect of his own downfall. Okay, the play is kind of that audience viewing this man going on a path of self-destruction. Okay, lovely. So Act 1, Scene 1. So your first, ladies and gentlemen, your first key moment, your first key scene is the following. Okay, opening up, Lear, he's the elderly king of Britain. He's opening the scene of the opening scene of the play. He informs the court that he plans to divide the kingdom, his three daughters, Goneril, Regan, Cordelia. To determine whom will receive the largest portion of the kingdom, Lear conducts, again, this, in inverted commas, love test. Goneril and Regan, alright, so the baddies, okay, the really kind of not nice daughters at all. Goneril and Regan, they're power hungry, they're manipulative, they have no trouble whatsoever in fawning over their father in order to claim ownership over Lear's lands. So they know full well if they can put on a show here, if they can pretend to be everything that Lear wants them to be, that they'll be the ones rewarded. So they have no problem. Cordelia then, on the other hand, so Cordelia, she is like chalk and cheese, okay? So Goneril and Regan are the cheese, Cordelia is then very much the chalk, okay? She's his youngest, but she's his most true and his most loving daughter. Alright? She loves and adores and is loyal and honourable to her father purely because she's his daughter. Okay? So she simply says she loves her father. She loves, I love you, Lear, beyond words. Okay? She can't actually put into words, and I'm your daughter and that should be enough for you. Alright? But it's not. Okay? We definitely know it's not. So now we have this key idea coming up for Lear's poor judgment, blinded by his own ego. And guys, this is what I mean about not giving a summary. Pick key moments that tell you something. Pick key moments that illuminate the plot, that have a personal engagement with you, that make you want to respond to something, okay? And this is the first kind of key idea we're going to be looking at today. Lear's poor judgment. He is blinded by his own ego. So instead of trusting in the true love of Cordelia, Lear falls for the artificial, the false love displayed by his two older daughters. And he flies then into a complete rage, okay? And this idea, I've underlined it, the idea of blindedness, okay? So Lear, he's blinded by his own power and ego. Like, Lear is a man at this stage at least, okay? He does go on a journey, but at this stage, he's completely unlikable. He is very much a man that believes his own hype. So he's nearly like think of someone like Donald Trump in a modern context, okay? Like, Lear believes he's fantastic, or he completely believes in his own hype and his own ego. And that cuts him off then from any sense of logic. Because again, if you're so cocky, if you're so blinded by your own self-belief and your own kind of I'm fantastic, you're not going to be thinking logically. You're not going to be thinking with any kind of sense of perspective. So he banishes Cordelia. All right, he's furious. Like, how dare you? Who do you think you are? I've told you to tell me you love me and show me you love me, and you're not doing what your two lovely, happy sisters are doing. So he banishes her. All right, and he forces Cordelia again to become an outcast. Okay, so it's the first kind of poor judgment he goes through. He also banishes Kent at this stage as well. So it's Lear starting to push away those in his inner circle that are actually true to him, that are actually on his side. And again, I'm not going to read through all the quotations because we'll be here all night and you can read back through the slides yourself. I should say as well, if you do want a copy of these slides, there is, if you see in our comments there's a link to a Google form. feel free, do please fill that in, no charge. You can get a copy of these slides as well, okay? And it's in the comments below, and it's in our chat as well. So I will just say here, I'm just going to read these quotes because they are important, and the quotes I have put in, hopefully it will do some of the legwork for you. All right, the important quotes you need to know from start to finish are in these slides, so you don't need to go digging out, should I use this quote, should I use that quote? And you don't have to use them all either, but I'll talk about kind of how to use quotes as we go on. Which of you shall say doth love us most? All right, so he's kind of like, he's nearly kind of like, okay, put on a show, I want to hear. Nothing will come of nothing. So that's his kind of response. Here I disclaim all my paternal care, propinquity and property of blood, and as a stranger to my heart and me. So there, ladies and gentlemen, go back to what I said about the tragedy formula. Right there, that quote there. Here I disclaim all my paternal care, propinquity and property of blood. He is disowning his daughter. That there is the disruption of the natural order. Okay, in two ways. One, Lear as a father, first of all, has disowned his own daughter. That's not a natural thing to do. Okay, he's like property of blood. He's basically saying, you're dead to me. You're no longer my daughter. That's not good. Again, these kind of social functions, these kind of pillars of society, that idea, the family unit being one of them. Lear is disowning his own daughter. Secondly, the fact, first of all, that Lear, this idea of kingship, okay, Lear kind of, again, to be a king is a lifelong kind of, well, it should be the idea of monarchy, the divine right of the king. It's meant to be this kind of lifelong service to your subjects. Lear's giving up that. Okay, he still wants to sit on the throne, but he feels he's getting too old, and he's going to spend his last kind of couple of years going between his three daughters, and in this case two daughters, kind of just living the life of Riley and leaving the ruling of the court up to them. Again, it's not the ideals associated with kingship that we would expect. All right, so Lear's poor judgment, blinded by his own ego, these disastrous decisions, that's the disruption of the natural order. Let's keep going then. So scene 2, the subplot. So this introduces audience to the subplot in the play. So it's kind of, you have the main plot of Lear and the three daughters. There's another plot going on at the same time. The family dynamics between Gloucester and his two sons, Edmund and Edgar. So Edmund is the illegitimate son, and he's a social outcast. He's the bastard son. So he's labelled as the bastard by society. So he's the illegitimate son. So basically, Gloucester had an affair, and outside of marriage, obviously, and the result of that affair was the illegitimate Edmund. And he's treated badly. So this just shows how bitter and hateful Edmund is toward his brother Edgar, his father, and society as a whole. So he really, now, if you want to talk about Edmund for a minute, he really has a chip on his shoulder. Again, the English society, the English court, Lear's kind of royal court that we see here, you are a social pariah, you are an outcast, you are not treated the same. So again, like I say here, the judgmental and harsh society, that acts as a motivation for Edmund to seek revenge through a number of manipulative schemes and plots. Alright, so Edmund really is, the villain of the play in many respects. I know you have Goneril and Regan, but it's kind of the dirty kind of scheming and plotting is always kind of has Edmund's fingerprints on it. So very kind of literally what's actually happening in the scene. So Edmund, he forges a letter telling his father that it has a plot by Edgar to murder him and take his land and wealth. So Gloucester is shocked by this. He takes Edmund's word as truth. So you should be seeing here, kind of critical thinking student, you should be seeing, oh, so that's similar, that's mirroring. And again, this idea of mirroring between Gloucester and Lear is a kind of common thing that comes up. We'll talk about it in future sessions. But he takes Edmund's word as truth. So if I was to ask you, well, where else do you see that? You see that in the previous scene, the love test. Okay? We know that Goneril and Regan they're not true. They're full of rubbish. We don't believe anything. But Lear believes that his daughters are telling him the truth. Just like here now, Gloucester takes Edmund's word as truth. So you have two elderly men. Alright, this is the subplot. You have two elderly men, Lear on one side, Gloucester on the other, and both, what are they doing? They're taking the side of the bad child. They're putting their trust and their faith in the wrong people. Okay? Over and to the expense of their children that are actually decent and loyal to them. Okay, so Edgar is cast aside in favour of Edmund, and Cordelia, poor Cordelia, is also cast aside in favour of her two older sisters, Gonor and Regan. Alright? So, this key idea then, Edmund, like I said, he's the villain. He's the master manipulator. So at the same time, Edmund tells his brother that Gloucester is out to kill him and that he should flee the court straight away. Alright? So here again, it's further that idea of the natural order being disrupted. Edmund succeeds. Edmund's villainy succeeds again in setting father against son for his own advantage. So there is a complete disruption to the kind of natural family order. The natural social order is gone. Okay? And again, I'm not going to go through the quotes here. I will just, this one here, the last one. These late eclipses in the sun and moon portend no good to us. Though the wisdom of nature can reason it thus and thus, yet nature finds itself scourged by the sequent effects. Love cools, friendship falls, brothers divide in cities. The end of that quote in particular, it's just basically being like, look, this is what's happening to the court. The court is kind of falling down around itself. Okay? So, moving swiftly on, we're now in the second act. And the focus of the second act is you're seeing now the results, the consequences of Lear's awful kind of judgment and his awful decision making. Alright? So Kent arrives first of all at Regan's castle, and he enters into a verbal and physical fight with her servant Oswald as a show of loyalty to Lear. So good old Kent, put it this way, if you're ever in a tight spot, you would want someone like Kent as a friend. Alright? Kent is one of Lear's, if not Lear's, most loyal and devoted servant. Alright, so the role of Kent in the play, it's something we'll speak about when we look at a session on characters. Cornwall and Regan then, they place Kent in the stocks as punishment for fighting. Gloucester doesn't think this is a good idea, so Gloucester arrives on the scene as Lear will be unhappy when he discovers how someone as loyal to him as Kent is being treated. Regan, though, she doesn't actually care about this, thinking it more of an offence to her servant than to her father. So what am I talking about here, guys? It's this idea, the two sisters, they've gotten their feet under the table. They've gotten what they wanted. They've hoodwinked their father into getting his kingdom. And now they're actually treating people in his inner circle like they're putting Kent in the stocks, and they don't actually care. Alright? And they're punishing him. And Gloucester comes along. The king must take it ill that he, so slightly valued in his messenger, should have him thus restrained. Okay? My sister may receive it much worse, to have her gentlemen abused, assaulted for following her affairs. Alright, so Regan is getting, I don't know if cocky is not the right word, but she's confident, she's assured in the power she has now. Alright, she's not afraid to answer back Gloucester or to kind of put Kent in the stocks. Just, like I said, they're getting their feet under the table. Okay then, so Act 2, Scene 4, Lear's rage and Lear's anger. Alright, so again, this idea that I spoke about of Lear going on a journey, okay? A lot of that journey, if not a significant portion of that journey, is Lear not actually realising or not actually reflecting on anything that's happened. It's very much Lear just kind of raging at the court around him. Like, he's absolutely fuming at what's happened to him. Okay? There's the famous quote coming up in a few minutes. Hopefully you'll know what it is. But again, so this idea, Lear's rage and his anger. So following on Act 2, Scene 4, Lear arrives at Gloucester's castle and he is appalled to see Kent being treated in such a way. I should say as well, he arrives with a kind of a big entourage. I think it's 100 knights or something, okay? Lear, he tries to appeal to Regan as his daughter, informing her of how disrespectful Goneril has been. In response, Regan reacts coldly, pretending to be tired and unbothered by what she has heard. So what's happened now, his entourage has been kind of diminished, and he's kind of just going from one castle and he's like, well, you know what I'll do? I'm going to tell your sister on you. So he still thinks at this stage, because think again, he fell hook, line and sinker for the love test. He fell for kind of the daughters fawning over him. So he thinks, yeah, I'm going to go to your sister and I'm going to tell her how bad you've been to me. She's not bothered. Like, they don't actually care now. They've gotten what they want off their father. They don't actually need him anymore. Okay, so Lear commands that he is shown respect from those around him, especially his two daughters. So this kind of gives him the dual thing here. Lear commands respect as king, but also commands respect from his daughters. And he doesn't get it, okay? And that brings in that idea of filial ingratitude, Okay, filial ingratitude. It sounds very posh and impressive. It basically is the idea of children being ungrateful towards their parent figures. Okay, it's described in much more detail for you in our study packs that are available on examrevision.ie. But like I said, they're filial ingratitude. It's basically this idea of they're rejecting kind of the sense of loyalty and respect that they should have towards their kind of paternal figure. At the same time then, Golan and Regan, they're deliberately trying to torment and bait their father to the point that he reacts in a complete fury. He's furious and he's raging, and he storms out of the castle into the storm outside. So again, it's kind of like they're starting to show their true colours now. Okay, they want to wind their father up. They don't actually care. I would nearly argue that they're getting enjoyment out of it. Okay, so that they don't care, to the point where Lear does leave the castle, and that there is symbolic in many respects, because Lear leaves the castle. That's the king leaving his court. All right. The next time Lear is within, like, the physicality, the next time Lear is literally in the court is near the end of the play. All right. So Lear now is literally, symbolically, metaphorically, figuratively, whatever way you want to say it, Lear now is starting on that path of kind of suffering and the journey that will hopefully bring sort of clarity to him. Okay. So developing quotation capacity. So look, I've all these dandy quotes for you here. I'm not going to go through them all. There is just, where is the one I'm looking for? This one here, the third bullet point there, you might see. Lear is shocked at the treatment he is receiving from his daughters and calls on the gods to witness his grief. He refers once again to losing his sanity because he is overwhelmed due to his daughter's behaviour. You see me here, you gods, a poor old man, as full of grief as aged, wretched in both. O fool, I shall go mad. And then the last one here, Regan has no sympathy for Lear and reminds him how old and near death he is. So again, you're seeing here this idea of Lear cannot fathom why he is being treated so badly. All right, so Lear isn't owning himself here. Lear isn't kind of, there's no inward kind of thought process. Lear isn't kind of the idea of holding a mirror up to himself. All right, so he's not thinking, oh my God, I have acted so badly. He's thinking, oh my God, how could they act so badly towards me? And that's kind of what he's running on now. Again, that idea of running on steam. Lear is running on pure just rage, anger, confusion and hatred. All right, and it's being met with, again, this complete kind of, it's really kind of callous nearly. She's no sympathy for him. Oh, sir, you are old. Nature in you stands on the very verge of her confine. So it's kind of like, what are you complaining about? Like, you're going to be dead soon. All right. Again, filial ingratitude. It's unnatural. It's uncomfortable as well. All right. So again, bring it back to the personal response. Bring it back to the personal engagement. You're the audience. You're the reader. You're squirming in your seat, or you're like, that's not really nice. All right. So you're seeing. So again, imagine this was a modern day adaptation. It would be like, imagine Lear had, say, dementia or Alzheimer's, and Lear's daughters are just really being very nasty and vicious towards him. They're not showing him any kind of respect or love or loyalty. All right. Can I just say as well, developing quotation capacity. So look, you hopefully all know that, and I'm sure your fantastic teachers have also said it to you, that when you're looking at the single text, just like when you're looking at poetry or something, quotes are essential. Quotations are vital. All right, but let's go a bit deeper than that. All right, there's no point learning a quote or learning off a page of quotations and just regurgitating 20, 30 quotations in an exam. All right, that's a ridiculous amount of quotations. What gets that higher quality answer? And when I say a higher quality answer, I'm talking H3, H2, or maybe even a H1, so 70% up. What will get you that is carefully considered quotations. All right, because a quotation on its own doesn't actually prove anything. All right, the examiner much prefers, okay, the idea that you're kind of teasing out for them on the page. All right, all the quotation does then is back up that idea, or it enriches it, or it proves it, or it demonstrates, yeah, okay, wow, he or she, this candidate, they're excellent. They really know this point. All right, they've developed a lovely point in line with the question. It's done beautifully. Everything's very nice. and bingo, the golden nugget, there's a quote to back it up, to demonstrate it. But again, you're the star of this show. When you're writing your essay, it's the examiner wants to hear what you think. All right. Of course, they want to hear what you think in relation to the question, because again, I think the question is the umbrella that you kind of have to work under. But they're like 20 quotations without any explanation are useless. It's a waste of time. So just be careful in your consideration of quotes. It's much better to have 4, 5, 6, 7, 5 or 6 kind of really well chosen, coherent, nice quotations, I would say, rather than 20 that aren't really developed and you don't really know what you're doing, but your teacher said you had to learn them and you went home and you just regurgitate them. That, like, it's grand. You'll get a H4, you'll get a H5. You want that better quality though. Okay, you want to be getting up to those H3 and up if possible. All right, you do that by carefully considering quotations. Okay. Okie dokie then. So Act 3, Scene 2, the storm scene. Now, if you have a piece of paper in front of you, I would like, I'm not going to force you, I won't know if you do or not, but I would, if I were you, write down the storm scene is important and then put a big circle around that. All right, you need to know the storm scene. It's kind of probably the most iconic, or at least it's a scene that really, really stands out for the audience, okay? So, the gathering storm has finally hit, and Lear literally and metaphorically finds himself, you know that idea, in the eye of the storm. Alright? So, locked out of his own castle, Lear rages against the wind and rain. Alright? He's refusing to give in to the chaos of the storm, and he continues to rage against his daughters. So in this as well, because again, you need to treat the text as a theatrical, as a dramatic piece. It's a piece of theatre, it's a play, all right? Don't just treat it as kind of this literary kind of two-dimensional thing. So this scene has high kind of dramatic intensity. And I think, is it the 2018 question on Lear, it mentions this idea of moments of dramatic intensity. This is a perfect one, say, if you're answering that, okay? The storm scene, it's magnificently dramatic. Okay, so if you were to see this in the theatre, it is this idea, Lear is completely going hell for leather, alright? There's wind, there's storm, like it's overpowering, it's intense, and he's standing there shouting at the top of his lungs, okay? Lear rejects the advice of Kenton the Fool, okay, remaining hell-bent on his own anger and his own sense of superiority. So for the most part in this scene, Lear still believes his own hype. Lear is still hell-bent and overly concerned with how could they do this to me. Alright, the Fool then, he continues to offer audiences a depth and foresight that sets them apart. And again, that kind of technique there, the dramatic technique, it's dramatic irony. It's ironic that the court jester, that this kind of class clown, the Fool, is actually, he's kind of giving a commentary to the audience. He's kind of commenting on how mad Lear has become. Alright, so he in many ways for an audience, he speaks kind of the most sense or the most truth. Okay, he speaks a truth that the other characters kind of either don't want to or aren't capable of. And again, being the Fool, there is that irony there. Alright, so just to kind of develop this idea of Lear's madness, okay, and in relation to the storm scene. So, what's happening? Lear is out in the storm, again, which symbolises the physical and the symbolic turmoil and disruption in the court due to Lear's division of his kingdom and his descent into madness. So, what do I mean by that? It sounds very impressive. It sounds very kind of posh or fancy, whatever. What it actually means, very simply, is Lear is the king. Alright? So, the idea is he's the ruler of the kingdom. The book stops with Lear. So, again, if you have a mad king, you're going to have a mad court. You're going to have a mad kingdom. Physically and symbolically, it's in turmoil. Alright? So what's happening? Physically, like his kingdom is starting to kind of disintegrate around him. Alright? There's a mad storm, like the physical environment, the weather, the wind, the rain, the lightning, it's attacking his kingdom. Alright? So the heavens are kind of reacting to this kind of Lear's rejection of kingship and divinity. Okay, so Lear is kind of, he's gone human, and it's that human weakness that Lear has. Alright, so you have that, and then the symbolic turmoil being the fact that Lear is kind of going through this crisis, he's going through this chaos, and while he's going through this turmoil, his daughters are taking hold, and evilness is kind of starting to kind of seep into the court. Okay, so the disruption is also mirrored in the destruction of Lear's mind. All right, so there's a storm going on in Lear's mind just as he's physically in a storm. Okay, so he asks the storm to destroy him. Blow, winds, and crack your cheeks, crack nature's molds. All germs spill at once that make ungrateful man. All right, so he's like, okay, come at me. Okay, here we go, let's go. All right, so he's really just raging in the middle of this complete madness and chaos. Lear doesn't blame the storm for suffering. The only guilty ones in his eyes are Regan and Goneril. Again, the most telling word there. The only guilty ones. So again, Lear's madness. He still has an inability to see the error of his ways. He's blind to his own part in this destruction. Okay, so Lear doesn't blame the storm. I tax not you, you elements with unkindness. I never gave you kingdom, called you children. Here I stand your slave, a poor, infirm, weak, and despised old man. So again, that's a key quote. All right, so if you have kind of a highlighter right now, or if you have kind of the mental highlighter in your brain, okay, remember that quote. And what does it show us? What does it tell us? How can you demonstrate you understand the quote? It's that idea of it's the Lear's fall from grace. All right, so Lear has gone from being this egotistical, mighty, noble king, he believes himself, to this kind of here I stand your slave, a poor infirm. Infirm just means kind of weak, incapable. Okay, and despised old man. All right, so he's weak. All right, so Lear isn't this divine, all-knowing, all-powerful king as much as you would like to think he is. What is Lear? Lear is a human. All right, he is a flawed, vulnerable old man. All right, so you can kind of yes and no, but you can separate Lear the man and Lear the king. They don't add up. All right, Lear is, in this scene at least, in the storm scene, he is this vulnerable, sick, chaotic old man. Okay, and again, Lear suggests that he is the victim rather than the perpetrator of sinful deeds. I am a man more sinned against than sinning. Now, again, you cannot write a King Lear essay without including that quote, because it's so telling. I am a man more sinned against than sinning. So Lear believes that, yeah, okay, maybe I've done stuff bad. Maybe I've behaved wrongly. Maybe I've done this. Maybe I've done that. Yada, yada, yada. But, but, what's been done to me is so much worse. All right, so his viewpoint of the world is still very much, well, hang on, no, this is what's happened to me. So again, he's not taking ownership over any of the things. He's not looking at his part in this destruction. Okay, so despite Lear's realization that he is losing his sanity, he does retain some degree of kindness, as he seems to worry about Kent and the fool. My wits begin to turn. Come on, my boy. How does my boy art cold? So you're starting to see here now as an audience, a little bit of sympathy. All right, you're starting to see a different version of Lear. I won't even say a different version, but just another kind of part of Lear. All right, you're starting to separate. There's starting to be some distance here between the king that is Lear and the old man that is Lear. All right, so we start to have sympathy. All right, and this is what makes the tragic hero. This is where the genius of Shakespeare. You might have hated Lear at the start, how arrogant and kind of just pompous and egotistical he is. But yet, as an audience member, and again, it's all about that personal engagement, that kind of rich personal response. As an audience member, it is sympathy. You do have sympathy to some degree for Lear here, because he's not all bad. All right, Lear isn't bad. He just makes bad decisions, and that's that kind of deeper, kind of character, kind of philosophical study that we'll do in future sessions. Okie dokie. So Act 3. So we're flying along here in the scenes. Gloucester's blindness. So what's happening here? So as Cornwall and Regan grow in power, they become more violent and uncontrolled. The evil is starting to take hold in the court. So Cornwall as a character, as again, like I said, we'll do future sessions on characters. So Cornwall and Regan together, they are kind of this kind of gruesome twosome. All right, you have Goneril, but Goneril and Regan, they're very, very similar. They're the two sisters, but at the same time, as a student, as an answer, don't lump the two of them together too much, okay? And what I mean by that is, as a person, Goneril, I would argue, is kind of the brains of the operation. She is manipulative, she is cunning, she is evil, she's all of the things that Regan is, but it's kind of a quiet evil. It's a kind of scheming, it's a plotting against the brains behind the operation. Whereas Regan she is just kind of this maniac. Okay, got Cornwall and Regan as a couple. They are this kind of dangerous couple. Okay, they will hold on to their power by any means necessary. And again, Cornwall in particular, he is this he's a pig as a character, really. He's really dangerous, volatile, animal-like character. Okay, so following Edmund's betrayal, so Edmund aligns himself with Cornwall and Regan to kind of improve his own social standing. Gloucester is brought before them and he's chained to a chair. So after an interrogation by Cornwall, it's clear that Gloucester has helped Lear to reach Dover. So again, Gloucester, despite his flaws, he does kind of nail his colours to the mast. He wants to help Lear. He remains loyal to Lear. Which leads Cornwall to torturing Gloucester's punishment, because again, by getting Lear to Dover, it means that he is protected by the French army that are going to launch an assault on the court to kind of restore Lear. And again, Regan and Cornwall, they want to hold on to power. All right, they fear a challenge to their power. This illegitimate power that they have, by the way, because they manipulated the power out of their father. So the fact that Lear has actually reached into Dover, it is this kind of oh no moment. All right. And what happens? So Gloucester pleads with Edmund to help him. Regan revealing, though, that Edmund was actually the one to give him up in the first place. Cornwall, he gouges out Gloucester's eyes. So he physically, literally gets a dagger, a knife, a blade, and he takes it to Gloucester's eyes and removes his eyes, okay? Blinding him. And again, this key idea of blindness continually comes up in the play, okay? Who can see and who cannot see. Again, both literally, but also kind of metaphorically, symbolically as well. Throwing him out of the castle on Regan's orders. So again, key scene. So this key idea of blindness. So the blinded Gloucester ironically looks for Edmund. He hopes that he will avenge his blinding. Edmund, enkindle all the sparks of nature to quit this horrid act. So again, those sparks of nature. All right, you're my son, stop them. Protect your father. Take revenge, look after me. Regan then, she coldly taunts Gloucester. All right, so again, what we're seeing here, this woman she has history. She's formed now of kind of abusing and manipulating elderly men. Thou callest on him that hates thee. It was he that made the overture of thy treasons to us, who is too good to pity thee. All right, so she takes pleasure in kind of being, you stupid old man. Do you not realise it was him that got you into this position? Gloucester then, he realises the error, so it dawns on him. Oh, my follies, then Edgar was abused. Kind gods, forgive me that and prosper him. Alright, so oh no, what have I done? Regan then, she has no sympathy for Gloucester. Go thrust him out at gates and let him smell his way to Dover. So that kind of really kind of cocky, arrogant, kind of nearly taunting him again, teasing him. Throw him out of the gates. So he's blind now. Alright, so Gloucester physically cannot see now. Let him find his own way to Gloucester. Let Gloucester find his own way to Dover, excuse me. Okay, so again, I'm aware of the time, don't worry. So I'm not going to stop at 3. I will finish, but I hopefully will be finished by 3:15, so I won't keep people too much longer. And like I said, if you put all of your questions into the chat function, I promise I will respond to your questions. And like I said, this will also be available at the end on our YouTube channel, examrevision.ie. Okay? So, cracks begin to sow. So, Act 4, Scene 2, why is it important? Because, again, up to this point, the idea was evil, evil, evil. Evil is in charge. Kind of those that are good are kept away, they're hidden, they're outcasts. But now you start to see cracks beginning to show. So Goneril's servant informs her that Albany, so Albany is the husband, no longer supports her, so he's a good guy. Albany's a goodie, okay? And he wishes to see Lear return to the throne. Goneril is furious at her husband and questions his masculinity. They argue and he tells her that her actions are shameful. Alright? Goneril disowns her husband at this stage, so she's basically like as a character, like, okay, I don't actually need you, I can't be dealing with you right now. And she wants to pursue, so she has her eye on Edmund. So, what a lovely man. So, she wants to at least pursue a romantic relationship with Edmund instead, even though she knows at this stage that her sister also has feelings for him. So, what happens? Basically, the two sisters, the gruesome twosome, Goneril and Regan, they end up there's a division between the two of them because they're both after the same. They both fancy Edmund, they're both after the same man. So a servant enters to inform Goneril that Cornwall has died following his injuries in blinding Gloucester. So we're starting to see their kind of karma. We're starting to see consequences. So Act 4, Scene 2 is important. Those cracks begin to show. Evil doesn't kind of just get to reign. There's consequences for the actions. Okay? And that's a continual thing in Shakespeare. People there are consequences, there are results for when you do bad things. Alright? And again, so this key idea brings up the idea of vengeance and justice. So Albany is yet unaware, so I'm not going to read that one. There's one here in particular I want to read, okay? So the third bullet point. Albany acknowledges the fact that crimes committed here on earth are so quickly avenged. And he shows that there is a divine justice that watches over the affairs of kind of humans or mortals or men. And again, this connects to this would be a lovely kind of direct connection to the past exam paper question on the idea of justice, divine justice, the restoration, etc. So this shows you're above, you justicers, that these are nether crimes so speedily can venge. So there is a higher power at work, okay? And again, so Albany, you could say, and again, I'd write this down if you have a piece of paper in front of you, Albany acts as an agent of justice, okay? Albany is one of those good characters. He wants things to kind of go well, okay? Now, let's keep going. And again, I'm aware of the time, don't worry, and I will get to your questions. Mightn't finish bang on 3, but I promise I won't keep people too long. So, Act 4, Scene 6, the cliff scene. Alright, so again, for some reason, students kind of, again, maybe not all students, maybe not you, and if not you, fantastic. Students do kind of get a little confused, or why is the scene important? So again, I've tried to explain it very simply here. The cliff scene, Act 4, Scene 6. Gloucester, so he's blinded. He's physically cannot see at this stage because of what Cornwall has done. He's brought to the edge of a cliff by who he thinks is poor Tom. And again, we know, hopefully, poor Tom is not actually poor Tom. Poor Tom is Gloucester's son, Edgar, the good guy, disguised as poor Tom. Alright. Gloucester at this stage, he's really kind of licking his wounds. He wants his life to end. He's ashamed by the actions and he's exhausted from the suffering that has happened. So, poor Tom, he describes the cliff below for Gloucester, even though it is simply a small hill. Gloucester believes poor Tom's descriptions and goes to step off the cliff to his death. So he thinks, okay, I want the world to end. So Gloucester, it's not actually a real cliff, it's a tiny hill. He has a small fall to the ground, but he believes his life has been spared. Okay? And Edgar has arrived. So again, because Gloucester can't see, poor Tom is actually Edgar, but he thinks his son is actually just there to kind of protect him, to save him. So Edgar speaks to his father for the first time, and it becomes clear that Gloucester's faith in humanity has been restored. Later, Oswald, so remember Oswald is Goneril's servant, appears and he moves to kill Gloucester, but he himself is killed by Edgar in an act of defence towards his father. So you're starting to see, like I said, those cracks are shown. You're starting to see this idea of kind of what does it mean? Not what does it mean. You're kind of starting to see the forces of good take over the forces of evil. Okay? The forces of good taking over the forces of evil. Lear has an interaction with Gloucester about the role of justice and revenge as Cordelia's troops come to find Lear to take him to her, but through a mixture of madness, guilt and shame, he flees before they can get him. I have a question here from Sonia. Can I know how I can get better at explaining quotes? I find it a little bit confusing on how to do it. Yes, so Sonia, I promise I will answer that question as we get to the end. And there's a couple more there. How do we know themes, etc.? So like I said, guys, if you hang around, and I promise, I'm aware it's a Saturday, so you're really, really good for coming along, and I do appreciate all at ExamRevision, we do actually understand that this is a Saturday. But if you do hang around, I promise I will answer your questions as best I can at the end of the session. And like I said, I will be wrapped up by 3:15, okay? And do keep those questions coming in. I will get through them all. If not here, it'll be on Instagram, but I will respond to all of them, I promise. So this key idea, redemption then, and suffering. And again, that idea of redemption just means that to become better at something, or to kind of, you've done something bad, how can things heal? How can things become better? So Gloucester decides to endure whatever misery befalls him. Alright, so that idea of human suffering. And go back to the idea of suffering the journey. He will stop complaining and wishing for deaths. Henceforth I'll bear affliction till I do it cry out itself, enough, enough, and die. So he gets that idea. Lear at the same time, Lear acknowledges that Gonor Regan fooled him and that he was manipulated by their false love. Okay? And the second bullet point here is probably the most important. Goneril with a white beard. They flattered me like a dog. They told me I was everything. 'Tis a lie. So finally, thank God, we're the audience sitting here in the theatre or reading this wherever, we let out this sigh of relief. Oh my God, finally Lear is starting to see All right, he's okay. He's still angry. He's still furious. But there's a bit of Lear now realizing that, okay, this is what's happened, and it's kind of Lear going towards that sense of taking some sort of ownership. We're not quite there yet, but he does start on that kind of journey and that kind of path towards that kind of realization part of the tragedy formula. Okay, so Act 5, Scene 3. So finally, we're getting to the end, don't worry. So 5 to 3, and we're at the last scene that I want to talk about, and then I'll get to your questions, okay? So Lear and Cordelia, they're brought before Edmund as prisoners. So Lear does not seem too worried about his imminent defeat, but asks that instead he be left to stay with Cordelia. So Lear and Cordelia, they have reunited. So Cordelia, the whole idea was she'd lead the French army. The French king had to go back to France. They left the army at the camp in Dover, and Cordelia is the one to lead the army into battle. Doesn't actually work out for it, goes a bit pear-shaped. And the opening of the last scene is Lear and Cordelia. They're brought before Edmund. And you're seeing here, again, everybody, this idea of illegitimate power, I should say as well. Again, remember, Edmund has gone from being kind of labelled as this bastard social outcast to kind of being the de facto ruler alongside the two women, okay? So Edmund shows little mercy, demanding they both be taken away to be hanged. Alright, so remember, Edmund is talking about his king here. He's talking about people that weren't of his kind of social standing. So take them away to be hanged. Albany objects to this and wishes for them both to be spared. Regan reacts by basically saying that no, he's the social equal. He's the new Duke of Cornwall. He's my new man. So Edmund has succeeded in kind of reaching that kind of pinnacle of social standing. And it's kind of, he's done it in a way that it's kind of, he's given two fingers to society. Okay, he's now thinking like, well, look where I am now, and look where you are. Okay. At the same time, Regan starts to become unwell. All right, and she exits the stage. Goneril reveals that she has poisoned her sister so she could have Edmund for herself. So look, you might feel a little bit dizzy as we're going through these slides. Don't worry. A common kind of observation, or a common kind of thing with Shakespeare, is he drags the action of his plays out. The plot is kind of, there's the slow burner at the start, there's the big journey, and then all of a sudden, for one reason or another, he really kind of ramps it up. Okay, he really puts some petrol in the tank, and the ending just kind of rapidly happens. Okay, so the ending is vitally important. I would actually go back and I'd read the end scene. I'd literally go back to Act 5, Scene 3, and read it from start to finish. Alright, because so much happens in it. It's kind of going like bum, 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 bum. Alright, you kind of blink and you'll miss it because there's so much packed into it. So it's a criticism some would have of Shakespeare, the fact that his endings are so kind of lumped together. Okay, but yeah, what am I saying there? So Goneril has poisoned Regan, and Albany has had enough, and he openly accuses Edmund and his wife of plotting to kill him and overthrow the king. Keep going. Suddenly, Edgar arrives on stage and he challenges his brother to a duel. So remember, this is Shakespeare. It's meant to be dramatic. It's meant to be over the top. It isn't meant to be real life. Okay, it's classical drama. It's classical theatre. Edmund, he's fatally wounded by Edgar. So it is that kind of like, I challenge thee to a duel, and it's good and evil. So again, think of the tragedy formula. It's the forces of good and evil. It's brother against brother as well, though. So it is tragic. So as an audience member, you're thinking, wow, this is intense. This is tragic. Okay. By Edgar, and then Edmund, in his dying minutes, he confesses his guilt, and in an apparent act of redemption, reveals to his brother that he has ordered for Lear and Cordelia to be hanged. So, tragically, it is too late to save Cordelia. Alright, so she has been hanged on Edmund's orders. Edgar reveals that his father has also died of a broken heart. So basically, Gloucester thinks that all hope is gone, and he's like, I can't take this anymore. He's unable to cope with the thoughts of Lear being held prisoner. Alright, so and the fool has also kind of met his sticky end as well, I should say. The consequences then of Goneril's actions, they start to dawn on her. Alright, so it's interesting. Is she guilty? I don't know if I think it's too much. You're redeeming her too much by saying she's guilty. And again, future sessions we'll talk about that kind of the role of gender and the role of women in the play, looking at Goneril and Regan. But I would say she's overwhelmed by what's happened, okay? And she stabs herself to death. So in the space of a couple of pages, you see the death of Gloucester, you see the death of Edmund, you see the death of the fool, you see the death of Regan, you see the death of Goneril as well. Okay? Okay, and again, I'm seeing lots I'm getting reports of lots and lots of really good questions coming in. They will be answered. Again, I'll maybe get to one or two at the end, but keep them coming in. Even if they're not answered here, they will all be answered on Instagram story as well, okay? So make sure you are following the Exam Revision Instagram, because that's where all of these really good questions will hopefully get really good answers to them as well, okay? So let's keep going. So at this point, there's a traumatized and there's a devastated Lear. He enters on stage carrying the dead body of Cordelia in his arms. Now, I don't know, maybe I'm just a nerd, but if you go to a production of King Lear, and again, unfortunately, you probably didn't get to go to one this year because of COVID, but hopefully, if you enjoy Shakespeare, it is something you might get to go to in your own time in future. The ending is you wouldn't hear a pin drop in the theatre. All right, like you have this broken, devastated old man. Okay, and he's not in kingly robes anymore. He's kind of he's in just a filthy, dirty kind of nightshirt, and he's entering on stage with the body of his dead daughter in his arms. And there's that kind of really tragic intensity, because you're kind of like he's done this himself. He has nobody to blame here but himself. You know, it's that idea of you've made your bed, now lie in it. And even though he is lying in it, there's still that twinge of sympathy. There is still that kind of pang of, we feel sorry for him, because it's devastating to see. Okay, so any good actor playing the role of Lear, this is kind of, he breaks down on stage. Okay, so it's in the high intensity of this drama. Like, it's really here now. It's heartbreaking to see and to witness, okay? So he rants and raves, and desperately wanting this horror to not be true, finally he dies falling down beside the body of his dead daughter. He dies with a broken heart. So amongst all the death and destruction, Albany tells Kent and Edgar that together the three of them will become joint rulers of the kingdom and work to rebuild a new court. However, Kent, so we have to, again, it's a Shakespeare tragedy, get in as many deaths as we can. Kent, being forever loyal to Lear, sees no point in living now that Lear is dead, and takes his own life in one final act of devotion to his one true king. Okay, so again, this key idea, the restoration of order, and again, I am coming to the end of my kind of session today, don't worry. This restoration of order, what do we learn from it? What's happened? What was the point of it all? So Edmund admits his guilt, so I'm not going to read that. There is one here in particular that I do want to read. So first of all, Edgar believes that divine justice ensures that evil deeds which give us pleasure become instruments of torture to punish us. The gods are just, and ever pleasant vices make instruments to plague us. So in the end, good will win out over evil, but not for free. There is a terrible cost to that, and the terrible cost of that is the human loss of life, okay? So even though, like, the ending of the play, put it this way, and go back to the person response. Think of you writing the single text essay. Go back to the person response. Lear, like, the ending of this play is, okay, good is winning over evil, but it's not a happy ending. Alright, the conclusion of this play, it's a tragic conclusion. We don't know what will happen. All we know is there's a chance, there's a sliver of hope, alright, that things could be better. But basically, like, on stage, you're surrounded by dead bodies, both good and evil alike. Alright, this one here, the last line. There is optimism in the last two lines, that they're unlikely to experience such evil, suffering and self-sacrifice during the rest of their lives. The weight of this sad time we must obey. Speak what we feel, not what we ought to say. The oldest hath borne most. We that are young shall never see so much nor live so long. So again, it is this idea, the kind of the damage that this experience is actually inflicted on those that have actually survived. Alright, so the survivors, when I say the survivors, we're in single digits here. We're talking about the survivors being Edgar, and we're talking about the survivors being Albany. Alright, and they're like, whew, that was something. We've gone through this now. Alright, and again, it's their responsibility now, and it's very Shakespearean, kind of the sole survivor of the few survivors, rebuilt, start anew, start afresh, and hopefully, and this goes into kind of the philosophical, kind of deeper kind of look at kind of what is Shakespeare trying to say, that idea of social commentary. There's a really good diagram that I've created in the study pack for social commentary as well that would explain it to you, but basically, what have we learnt? Okay, and again, try not repeat the same mistakes of the past. Start anew, start afresh. Okay, so we will get to questions now in a second. So I'll go into the chat box now and hopefully answer as many as I can. Just before I do that though, if you want, first of all, do join us. So examrevision.ie, do set up an account with us if you did like today's session. We will have future sessions on King Lear. I would say within the next 2 weeks, if you keep an eye on our Instagram story, we'll be able to confirm that date. Probably going to be on a Saturday. But yeah, we will be running more sessions. I haven't got the exact dates of that yet. But again, keep an eye on our social media channels and it will have that. Examrevision.ie though, join us. There is lots more resources and there's full study packs for English. So again, there's the poetry of Sylvia Plath, Seamus Heaney, some notes on comparative, paper one kind of stuff. It is all there. And there's lots of other subjects as well. There's a whole plethora of stuff there. And then the discount code, I should say as well, sorry about that. Our discount code, if you do want to decide to avail of it, is Lear21, all caps, if you do want to do that. So what I'm just going to do now, guys, is I want to just show you, if you don't mind, just a quick glimpse at our website. So if you see there, it just gives you an idea, Leaving Cert English, kind of all the different parts of this. So we video tutorials, PowerPoint presentations, study packs, etc. Again, the study packs, they're like my baby. Okay, there's a lot of effort gone into the study packs to try and just your one-stop shop for looking at topics in English. And again, disclaimer, I am not a font of all knowledge. I'm sure you have really excellent teachers. This is just kind of giving you hopefully that bit of a leg up. And again, this year has been challenging with the exams, etc. So hopefully it can be something there to help you. Okay then, so I will just say thank you very much. I'm not finished yet. I will get to your questions. So let's see what kind of questions we have on our live stream. And again, I'll answer one or two here and I will get to all of them later on the Instagram story as well, I promise. Just let this load for me and I should be able to see the questions. Okay, so what have we got? What? Sorry guys, it's loading here for me. Wow, okay, so let's randomly pick kind of one or two that I might be able to be answered and then you can all be free and enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Okay, so I was just, let's say, okay, let's see. All right, so what was that question from Sonia, wasn't it? Can I know how I can get better at explaining quotes? I find it a little bit confusing. All right, so Sonia, what I would say is pick the quotes that you think are important. Hopefully go back to that PowerPoint. Again, like I said, there's a link to a Google form for the PowerPoint. It will, and you can get these slides, but pick quotes and ask yourself, what is this actually saying? So translate the quote into your own words. And again, also think, okay, the quote, brilliant, lovely, you have a quote, fantastic, but what do you actually want to say? So work out your discussion point first, and then how does that quote enhance that? All right, so think of it like that. Okay, it's not about how can you become better at explaining quotes. First of all, I think it's how do you become better at explaining your discussion points. All right, so think, consider, what am I trying to say? Where is it shown in the play? And use quotes then to kind of back up what you're saying. Do you have any tips? So do I have any tips on learning quotations? So there's different things that work for different people. I would say though, don't, like, it's a waste of your time sitting there drilling other teachers might be vehemently disagreeing with me. It is a waste of time, I think, though, sitting there kind of learning quotes off by heart. All right, so pick the ones that are comfortable, pick the ones that you can use that will enhance your discussion. So again, it's kind of the same answer. It's all about what you think. It's all about your discussion. What do you know? What do you think? All right. So you forget which ones to use. So key ideas, think of your discussion, And if you want a really practical thing, how do you learn quotes? You learn quotes by the more you read and the more you expose yourself, the more you think about the text, the better you will get at it will just kind of start to sink in. You can also start record yourself. I know it might sound a bit nerdy. I know it might be the coolest thing to do, but you don't have to tell anyone you're doing it. Record quotes, all right? Play them back to yourself if you're on a bus, if you're walking down the street, if you're lying in bed, okay? They will actually start to sink in, all right? So read as much as you can, write as much as you can, even just start thinking about it. And again, use the notes app on your phone, okay? Any couple of free minutes you get, and again, I know it's not particularly exciting, it's a bit nerdy, but the more you think about it, and this goes for anything in English, all right, it will start to sink in, okay? So I have a question here from Mary. How do you add a personal touch to the single essay? You can, and again, it's kind of an oxymoron because I've shared it with all of you. You can add a personal touch by trying to look, it's not about reinventing the wheel. Don't put yourself under pressure. This is an exam scenario. Also, I'm acutely aware that many of you mightn't, not that you're not good at English, but you might particularly enjoy English. You might be just treating it as another subject to get points in, which is absolutely fine. Let's be realistic, let's be practical. So how do you add a personal touch? You add the personal touch by making a really deliberate and conscious effort to keep bringing every discussion point back to what you've learned, how you can personally respond to something. So again, it is all about that kind of rich personal engagement. All right, so keep asking yourself in your head, what is this telling me? What am I learning? So again, the I pronoun, me. It's all about, you put it this way, it's all about you, okay? And what you've learned from the text, all right? What viewpoint you take from the text. Okay. Sarah, that's a very practical one then as well. If we're talking about a scene, would we need to use the act and scene number in the essay? Other teachers might disagree with me, but again, from correcting for the state exams, I don't. As long as there's not factual errors or kind of obvious factual errors, you can just refer it. You don't have to, because again, it's putting yourself under pressure. Don't worry about Act 2, Scene 3. Just call them like I have in the PowerPoint there. Call them the love scene, the cliff scene, the storm scene, etc. That's fine, because look, don't put yourself under pressure. So how do you structure the King Lear essay? Do you keep linking all the paragraphs? Yes. So the ExamRevision.ie, if you go on there, the study pack, like I said, it has very kind of structured notes, literally how to write a single text essay. So essay writing skills. Do you link the quotes? Do you link the paragraphs? Yes, I would say. Okay, so each discussion point is going to be different. That's true. But they all need to kind of blend together. They all need to fit under the umbrella of the question. All right. So basically what I'm saying is don't write in isolation. All right. But at the same time, try and keep your answers structured. So this is where the planning comes in. And look, again, let's be practical. You're not going to do like a mind map for 25 minutes in an exam, but just straight away when you go in, bullet point. Okay. Paragraph 1 is going to talk about, so the umbrella is justice. Paragraph 1 is going to talk about the fact that Lear is blind and his ego. Paragraph 2 is the consequence of that starting to step in. Paragraph 3, particularly the storm scene, Lear's madness. Okay. And just as an extension to that, and again, I will finish up in 2 or 3 minutes and I will get to all your questions, but just as an extension to that, look, Lear has been around for so long, like it's hundreds of years old. The questions, all you kind of have to do is what you've learned. Okay, so hopefully a couple of bits you've picked up here, but what you've studied this play over the last 2 years with your teacher. All right, apply that knowledge, apply your own reflection, and apply that to the question. All right, a lot of students think, oh, we didn't learn that, we didn't cover that. You did. You just have to think, how can I apply this knowledge, and how can I fit it over the question that you're being asked in the exam? Okay. Will more live sessions? Yeah, absolutely. So we'll do polls. I think we'll do a couple of more sessions on King Lear, but yeah, absolutely. I'd be very happy to do, say, a live session on, I don't know, Sylvia Plath, Heaney, paper 1. Comparative is a little bit different. I could do a live session on the modes, but it's a bit different because there are so many different text combinations. Could you argue that Cordelia has to die because English audiences would not accept a kingdom ruled by France, especially considering that in 1588 England had just seen off a Spanish invasion? I mean, okay, that's different. So you're kind of taking, if I'm reading that correctly, you're kind of taking a political kind of social political kind of view of it. Yeah, I'm not going to say you can't say it. I would just be careful. What does that add to your discussion? Do you know what I mean? What does that add to a kind of response to the question? Because it's a bit out there. Like, it's a lovely point. It's not something I've thought about, but again, I'm not going to say you're wrong. But all I would say there is ask yourself, how does that apply to your question? Because again, if you think you can pull it off, then fantastic, go for it. Hopefully it would pay off for you. It's about being that kind of bit kind of different. So that's a commendable attempt to be a bit different. So another question here from Katie. How many quotes should I know per character roughly to be covered for any question? Alright, Katie. So how many quotes? Again, I am suspicious, again, and this is from this, I have corrected the higher level papers for the last couple of years during the summer. I am suspicious when I see too many quotes, because you're not backing it up then. It's all about style rather than substance, where it has to be both. So I would say, instead of being concerned with how many quotes, like this isn't like English as a subject, it doesn't have an exact science or kind of combination. As a rule of thumb, I would say 6 or 7 really well considered quotes is fine. If you want to, okay, maybe a bit skimpy, let's say 8 or 9 quotes throughout the entire essay. And look, there's obvious ones you're going to know. So, for example, a Lear character study, you're going to look at, I am a man more sinned against than sinning. For the love test, nothing will come of nothing. For the storm scene in his madness, crack cheeks, blow wind, that long one there. So there's certain kind of banker ones that you're going to know. But yes, so just banker ones you're going to know. There's in a very specific answer to your question, don't concern yourself with, I must know 10 quotes for the character of Lear, I must know 5 quotes for the character of Cordelia. Make it a bit more organic than that, because your answer becomes robotic then. If you're focusing too much on insert quote here, copy paste quote here, and not enough on the discussion, so focus on what you want to say, and then how can the quotations naturally fit into what you're trying to say. Okay, and if you do that, that's what gets you the marks. Okay. What is the role of the fool and the significance of the play? So I think that's Sophie is asking that. So the role of the fool, why is the fool significant to the play? The fool is significant to the play because it just he or she, put it again, the original text, I imagine it's a male. The fool is there because it shows just how topsy-turvy the world has become. It shows how the world has been turned on its head. It's that dramatic irony. The fact that the court jester, the kind of the class clown, the character that shouldn't have the kind of significance that he does have. Okay, and equally then he's there as a character. I won't say he breaks the fourth wall, but he offers commentary. He offers insights that the audience are thinking. The fool as a character, he's there. His presence on stage, he's saying what we will be saying as the audience. Okay. And there's lots of other kind of reasons as well, and it's the study pack on ExamRevision will go into that in more detail. Olga, how many scenes would you recommend to discuss in an essay if it doesn't specify, like in the 2018 question? Okay, so that's a good question. So it will depend. So the scenes I've given you there, alright, so and again, other teachers might disagree, which is fine. And again, trust your own teacher. Okay, I'm just giving the session for ExamRevision.ie. I'm not your teacher, but the scenes I've given there in the slides, hopefully you don't need to go beyond what's in this PowerPoint. Okay, for the most part, I've deliberately tried to pick out scenes that can be used for different answers. So, for example, if you're asked something on the theme of madness, you're going to have to talk about certain scenes. So obviously the anchor scene would be the storm scene. So you'd have the storm scene, you'd have the kind of the scenes leading up to the storm scene, kind of the entourage, you'd have the love test, and then you'd have the ending. All right. So I'd say about 3 to 4 scenes. And again, it's not an exact science. There's some questions that are going to require you to talk more. Like, again, if it's a madness, your guiding scene is going to be the storm scene, obviously. Okay, so these are really good questions, and I hope I'm at least giving you some ideas on how to answer them. Okay, let's see. We'll take, say, 2 more, and then the rest I'll do on Instagram stories. So do feel free to go to the Instagram stories as well. So what is Kent's role in the play? So Kent, Abby is asking that, and again, nice question. What is Kent's role in the play? So again, his role is described to you in more detail in the study pack on ExamRevision.ie. But Kent's role in the play, he is that ultimate loyal servant. Okay, so he is there to act as kind of the protective kind of thing around Lear, first of all. So the loyalty of Kent is something that doesn't wane. Okay, so there are those that remain loyal to Lear. There are those that have Lear's best interests at heart. And again, what else is Kent there for? So first of all, the loyalty, but second of all, again, it just shows the tragic intensity of the play again. Okay, so how warped and how disrupted the play has actually become. Okay, that someone as good and as noble and as decent as Kent is suffering the way he is suffering. And I don't mean just at the hands of Goneril Regan, by the way. So this is, again, you might be asking, how can you actually take a different angle on Lear, on the role of Kent? Remember at the start, guys, Lear's the character, first of all, that banishes Kent, just like he banished Cordelia. All right, so Kent, kind of, why is Kent doing what he's doing? Why is Kent there? He's also showing the kind of the poor judgment of Lear. So he's another character to just bring out the worst aspects or the most kind of unsavory or unattractive aspects of Lear's character. Okay, so I hope that helps. Again, like I said, the role of Kent is described in more detail in our study packs as well. Let's see. Should we develop our answer in chronological order of the play, or can we manipulate it more to our preference? Oh, okay, that's a good question. And again, I'm sure other English tutors would disagree with me. Look, I'd say for the most part, go in chronological order, because naturally, if you're discussing scenes, like, it wouldn't, put it this way, it wouldn't make sense that your last paragraph of an answer on the theme of madness mentions, or a character question on Lear, for example, or kind of how the way Cordelia would be a victim, that the last scene you mention would be the love test. All right, so make it easy for yourself. Talk about do try and answer it in chronological order. It doesn't, but I know what you're saying as well. Can you manipulate it more to your preference? If you think you can, and you think you can pull it off, do that. Because again, look, you're all 17, 18, 19, like you're all adults, so you can, and you're doing higher level subjects, so trust your own good instinct as well. All right, so hopefully you know yourself, like that kind of deep down feeling. Yeah, I feel like this is going well. Okay, I feel like this is going the direction I want to go in. But again, don't make it overcomplicated for yourself. Don't wrap yourself up in riddles. So yeah, short answer, go chronological unless you feel that the answer lends itself to being a bit more fluid. Okay, is it worth to learn off sample essays on the minor characters like the Fool? So I wouldn't say the Fool is a minor character. The Fool has a very specific, like I explained there a couple of minutes ago, but I know what you're saying. Again, some teachers might disagree with me. Sample answers, how do I feel about sample answers? They serve a purpose to a point. But what I would say, and what I would say to my own class, is that sample answers are there to copy the style, copy the tone. Okay, if you're wondering how do you write an essay, what's expected of you in an essay, I would say sample answers are great for that. Okay, that idea, kind of fake it till you make it. And look, you can take some pointers from it. You can take some, oh, that's a nice line, oh, that's a nice viewpoint, etc. But look, I think it makes, if you're solely relying on the idea of sample answers, it makes your essay become kind of stale or kind of robotic. All right. And again, the way the papers are going the last couple of years, it's much more relying on what do you learn? What can you bring to the table? What do you think after studying this poem? Or sorry, not this poem, this play. So yes, practical answer or short answer to the question. Sample answers are good if you're not sure how to start something, or you're not sure the approach or the style or the kind of the viewpoints you can take. So it helps you organize your ideas. But I'm much more interested in what you think rather than what someone else thinks and you're learning it off, because that shows through. All right. It's obvious most of the time to an examiner when you have just simply regurgitated something. Okay, so guys, I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you so much for those who have spent over nearly an hour and a half now on your Sunday with me. It is very much appreciated from everyone at ExamRevision.ie. I know I didn't get to all the questions there, so thank you to your questions. But I will answer the questions, like there's one there in PQE, for example, from Neve. I will answer the questions on our Instagram story, so I will get through them. I promise you will have responses to your questions. Throw them into the Instagram story. Go to the Instagram story now. I think there is a story up. So the questions you've asked here, put them into the Instagram story, and I'll spend a couple of hours this afternoon responding to them. All the different questions. Okay, so thank you so much. We will have more sessions. Keep an eye on our social media pages. It will give you more details. Again, ExamRevision.ie, really would like you to come on board, and yeah, I hope that's been helpful. Thank you so much.